Okay, who's screwed? America's children. This is a really serious issue. We have 16 million children living in poverty right now in the United States. About 1 in 5, 20%. And if trends continue, within the next half a decade, a quarter of our children will be living in poverty. We haven't had numbers this bad since the Great Depression. I mean, literally, it has been, we didn't have this kind of poverty after World War II. We didn't have this kind of poverty during the Eisenhower years. We didn't have this kind of poverty during the Kennedy and Johnson years. Well, Johnson, in fact, helped cut this kind of poverty. He cut poverty almost in half in 3-4 years. We haven't seen this kind of poverty since the even during the Nixon years, during the Clinton year, or during the Carter years, during the Reagan years and the Bush years. Of course, they were living on a credit card. They spent $5-6 trillion to make it look like we were living large, but we didn't have that kind of poverty. We didn't have this kind of poverty under the Clinton administration. This poverty has been brought to us courtesy of Reaganomics, particularly as applied brutally by George W. Bush. So in the face of this kind of poverty, a quarter of our children about to live in poverty, a fifth of our children living in poverty right now as I'm speaking. What's the Republican plan? What do they want to do about this? What is John Boehner and Eric Cantor saying? This is what we need to do. Well, they're pretty specific about it. Kids are in poverty. We need to cut services to low-income children. The Republicans want to cut the Head Start program. They want to cut the Child Nutrition Assistance program. They want to cut the WIC program, Women, Infants, and Children. They want to cut education, health care, support programs for disadvantaged kids. This is just think about this for a minute. What these Republicans are about. Last year, right now we're at a time of unprecedented child poverty. What do they want to do? They want to cut the programs aimed at preventing child poverty. Last year, we were at a time of historically high unemployment. What did the Republicans want to do? Cut off unemployment insurance. Just like when we were facing an all-time uninsured crisis, 50 million Americans, no insurance. What do the Republicans want to do? Stop any kind of reform of the insurance program that might insure more people. Year before that, we were in the heels of a financial crisis. We had Wall Street crashing around us. We had banksters walking off with millions and billions, asking for trillions in bailouts. What did the Republicans want to do? They wanted to stop the efforts of the Democrats to reform Wall Street and prevent anybody from doing any investigations of what happened. Last year, we had the BP oil spill. Disaster. And by the way, a great thread over at Democratic Underground about this. This guy talking, he's in the supermarket talking to his buddies, and this guy goes, well, we need to drill, baby, drill, right? And he goes, what, you think these international oil companies have any loyalty to us? They're transnational corporations. It doesn't matter where they get the oil. It goes into the world oil market. There's no such thing as our oil. Anyhow, just like in response to the environmental catastrophe, the BP oil spill, the Republicans wanted to kill alternative energy legislation and keep giving the oil industry $3 billion a year in welfare payments. Remember Ronald Reagan? He said, oh, there's a woman who drives up in her Cadillac to get a welfare check. We can't have that. And the New York Times said, really, where? And they put a bunch of reporters on it, and they spent 6 months looking for this one woman that Ronald Reagan made the core of one of his major speeches. I think it was his State of the Union address. If it wasn't, it was one of his major speeches. And the New York Times was unable to, and of course the Reagan administration never found her. The New York Times couldn't find her. And now that we're in the time of high budget deficits, the Republican lapdogs to the rich want to give their millionaire and billionaire buddies a massive tax cut that, by the way, could have paid for all the programs for kids that are in crisis and in poverty right now that I just described that the Republicans want to cut. Are these guys really this nuts? Or have they made a deal with the devil, a real Faustian bargain with the few crazed rich people who seem not to care about poor people in this country, and they don't know how to get out of this deal. Meanwhile, U.S. Uncut, the U.S. Uncut movement shutting down the Bank of America here in Washington, D.C. Yesterday, a group called Make Wall Street Pay tried to shut down. They were out protesting Bank of America not paying a dime in taxes in 2009, even though they're paying their banksters millions and millions of dollars and they're showing huge profits. They use 119 offshore tax havens to avoid paying taxes. Biggest banks in America: Wells Fargo, Citigroup, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. These 6 banks, all incredibly profitable. They just had their most profitable year in history. You and I aren't doing well. Main Street isn't doing well. The banksters, billions. They paid 11% on average in corporate taxes. U.S. corporate tax rate's 35%. Why was it so low? Because they got a lot of tax loopholes that they bought a lot of politicians to write into the legislation. Those billions that they didn't pay in taxes could have paid for these programs to lift children out of poverty in the United States, to create a new middle class out of these kids, to put these kids to work, educate them so that they can, as adults, they can become working Americans and build America. It's incredible. What are the Republicans thinking?